So this weekend, after reading the multiplication of the bread last week, we are starting the sermon of Jesus on the bread of life. It will be divided in a couple of Sundays, and so each Sunday Jesus will build up on what he has said before as we have started this weekend. However, I will not be preaching on that. I'll have the chance to preach on that aspect in 2 weeks from now, because next week, actually, because last week was Deacon Tim, was it not? Can't remember. Time is flying by so fast. Anyways, I'll have the chance to preach on that again, but today I wanted to preach about something else. And in actual fact, it will not be a homily. It will not be taken from the readings. It will not be taken from the liturgy of the Mass that we're celebrating. It will be a sermon then. So, and a sermon that will be just to instruct you on someone. Because it makes a few weeks that at the end of the liturgy of the Word, at the end of the prayers of the faithful, I say the prayer for the evangelization project of the diocese, and at the end of that prayer, I invoke Mary, I invoke Joseph, and I invoke Saint Columbkille. And some people have started to ask me, who is this guy that you're invoking all the time? Basically, the reason we invoke him in that prayer is because he's the patron saint of our diocese. He's the patron saint of the Cathedral Church in Pembroke, so we invoke him in a special way in that prayer. And so I figured I would present a little summary of his life so that we could get to understand a little more who he is. And I kind of delayed a few weeks to do that because I myself needed to look into who Columbkille is and learn more about him, about this saint. And he is a great saint that unfortunately around here we don't know much, but after today I hope you'll know more, and I hope that you'll be interested in going on the internet to read about him, to read of him, and perhaps to watch some videos like I did too, to learn more about his story. Columbkille is one of his name, Columb is one of his name, or Columba is another of his name. It is all the same name. And basically, Columb or Columba means dove. And at one point they added kill or kile, or in the Celtic language, which means church. So his name basically means dove of the church. And people are not sure if Columba or Columb was the name that he was really given at baptism, but in any case, Columbkille, the full name like that, was given later on in his life. Basically, he was born 1,500 years ago. And so we'll hear a little more about him this year, because the diocese where he was born has been in touch with our diocese and with all other kinds of places dedicated to him to celebrate a little bit of his birth anniversary, as it is his 1500th anniversary. He was born on December 7th, 521. He was born in Ireland, in Celtic country. And he is considered, with St. Patrick and St. Bridget of Kildare, to be one of the three main patron saints of Ireland. He's very, very important, in other words. He was born from Feidlimid MacFergus in Ethnia. Sometimes some names can be complicated to read. And he died in 597 on June 9th. So he was 75 years old when he died. He was born from a family that had royal links. One of the cousin of his father was a great king in Ireland. And so he could have become someone important in terms of aristocracy, but he decided to renounce all his title as a prince, to become a monk. And he ended up being the founder of many monasteries, first in Ireland and then in Scotland. He was also considered to be one of the 12 apostles of Ireland, with another saint called Saint Finian. So Columbkille is a monk that was good at composing hymns, poetry. Also, monks had the task of transcribing books, so he had that particular task. He worked a lot at that. He was a great singer. He was a great preacher. He taught well about his teaching, his sermons were well made. At one point, he wanted to organize a pilgrimage to Rome and to Holy Land. But unfortunately, as he was on his way there, he didn't make it farther than the city of Tours. I mentioned about Saint Finian. Saint Finian is one of his first abbot when Columbkille was a young monk, and so he learned a lot from Saint Finian, but at one point he got into an argument with Saint Finian. And basically the argument was about copyrights. We hear about copyrights nowadays. It existed 1,500 years ago too. What happened is that Finian had a book of the Psalms, a Psalter. All the 150 Psalms were written in that book. And Columbkille really liked that book. He wanted to copy that book, transcribe that book so that he could bring it to other monasteries where he was going. And initially, St. Finian said, no, I don't want you to copy it. So Columbkille, being determined, decided to copy the book by night, hiding in the chapel, and he was caught doing it. But St. Finian let him do it. He let him continue his work without saying anything about that, until Columbkille wanted to leave with the book, and St. Finian said, no, the book stays here. And some kings were involved in the dispute, and the king that tried to resolve the problem said that the copy belongs to the book, so the copy should stay with St. Finian. And of course, clans gathered and war started. Sometimes it's easy to start a war just looking at someone with the wrong face and you can start an argument. Well, it did that in this case. And unfortunately, it was a war that started between the two clans. And it produced many victims. Many people died of that war. So much so that Columbkille was threatened to be excommunicated. Yet, it resolved that he would go into exile, and his penance, his punishment for that situation was to evangelize and convert as many people as there had been victims of that conflict. So in 563, he left Ireland to go into the islands north of Ireland. He ended up on the island of Iona, far enough that he could not see Ireland, and there he founded another monastery. His main monastery was founded on that island. the islet of Iona. And from there, he started evangelizing the surrounding area, because if people are familiar with geography, Iona is one of the islands of what is now Scotland, but at that point it was part of the Gaels, and the main part of Scotland was the Picts, who were pagans, and no one was able to enter that land. Even the Romans had tried to enter that land, but the Picts were similar to the Vikings. They were very hard warriors, and so no one was able to penetrate that land. However, Columbkille ended up finding favor with the king of the Picts, Bridei, Bridei. Even if he did not convert that king permitted him to preach in his country, and so Columbkille ended up preaching, evangelizing, and converting many people in Scotland. So he is a great saint he's one of the main saints of Ireland, but he's also one of the main saints of Scotland. The little story, the anecdotes of his story, of course, they go back 1,500 years ago, so maybe some of these were embellished throughout time. But it is said that in 565, there was a situation where Columbkille ended up doing a miracle in link with the Loch Ness Monster. You've all heard about the Loch Ness Monster. It is said that there was this monster back then that was attacking anyone who was going in the water. And as Columbkille was walking that way, pagans of that area were about to do a burial of one of their kinsmen that had died from that monster. And so Columbkille inquired what was going on. They explained it to him. And so Columbkille asked one of his followers, a Christian, to go down in the lake. And as the monster was going to attack this Christian, Columbkille rebuked the monster, and the monster did not attack. And that left a big impression on the people of that area. I'm not inventing that. I found it. So you can go and look for it. You can see what it is all about. And I'm still relaying to you what I learned from my research. So his monastery in Iona ended up being the center point, becoming a school, if you want, for missionaries. It is from there that there was evangelization that was done in the Gaels and in the Picts, and it was very flourishing. All things come to an end, so Columbkille died in 597 at the age of 75, as I said earlier. And Columbkille, doing a few miracles in his life, also predicting some future, had predicted that there would be no one special at his funeral, just his religious community, his religious order. And it happened to be like that because no dignitaries were able to go on the island because there was a raging stormy sea that day. So he had this funeral mass simply, and he was buried by his brothers, the brothers of his community, in 597 AD. A few more things should be mentioned about him. Basically two things. Later on, 200 years later, the Vikings, it was now their years of glory. And in 795, then in 802, 806, 825, they started attacking the island, robbing everything that was of value and so on. And so in the mid-800s, the brothers that were there decided to transfer the relics, the remains of Saint Columbkille, somewhere else, somewhere more safe than the island of Iona. And because they had been important in Ireland and Scotland, they decided to divide his relics and send half in one place and the other half in the other country. And so nowadays, if we go into Ireland and into Scotland, we can see many places dedicated to Saint Columbkille, Saint Columba, or Saint Columb, and he is very important saint, considered saint not only by the Catholic Church, but by the Orthodox Church, by the Anglican Church, the Presbyterian Church. Many denominations still refer to him and take his patronage on their activities. And as I was reading about him, listening to historians talk about him, I found it very fitting and kind of a nice coincidence that we have a patron saint in our diocese that was dedicated so much for evangelization, so much for spreading the gospel in his time, as we are in our time in this project of evangelizing. And it is quite fitting to ask his intercession in our project of evangelization. You probably know, I don't know if I've mentioned that before, I am part of that committee for the evangelization of the diocese, and I sure know that at one of our future meetings, if it's not the next, the following, I will certainly bring up the subject of getting people to know more about Saint Columbkille, about our patron saints, so that we really understand whose patronage we ask, or whose intercession we ask, and realize the nice link between his life and our project. So now you know a little more about St. Columbkille, and please do not stay stuck with the Loch Ness Monster. Realize all the wonderful things he has done and how he can be of great intercession for us today.